Whenever I'm talking to a group of safety professionals, I always say, would only the real safety professionals stand up? And it's amazing to me that only one or two people will stand up in the group. That company is paying you 8 hours a day to be a safety person. They're paying you full wages for a full day's work, and you don't call yourself a professional?
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Dupont. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I am your host, Michael Dupont, founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Joining us today is Michael Dupont. Mike is a senior director of global health and safety at RAM. And I'll let him pronounce the full long name at the end here. But RAM is a leading high-performance cellulose and sustainable industrial materials company. Do lots of cool things. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Michael brings with him not only 20 years of global leadership and EHS experience, but he's been transforming safety programs and environments compliance-driven, but more importantly, human-driven. He oversees 11 major factories and facilities, across the U.S. He has hundreds and hundreds of employees that he's responsible for putting programs in place that are super easy to understand, well executed, and frankly, put humans first. And his 555 program is one of the key training expectations and performance things that he does, and I'm excited to talk to him about that. So with that, Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, little known fact that we had some technical difficulties and we literally had to hit pause button for 24 hours. We tried to do this yesterday and we're unable to do it. So gremlins went away, and thank you for your patience, and welcome back to the studio where we were yesterday.
Yeah.
So tell me, Mike, and you gave me permission to call you Mike, and I appreciate that. So from your journey perspective, the most important thing that we always try to start with is the human piece. So tell me about your family and your life. A little bit about you as the man, less so about you as the executive.
I have a wife and 4 children. My children are grown. I'm in the grandchild phase of life, which is terrific. Right, I have 4 grandkids, so I'm excited to visit them every time to just light my world up. So that's why I am at currently in my journey. I started in safety as far back as I can remember. Was my father. He ran a business of his own. And I remember as a kid, he said, really complaining that there was a new law passed and he had to go buy hard hats. So it's
yes.
Like, all right,
yes.
wow. So dad got a hard hat. It was one of those metal ones, with the full brim and the aluminum, I guess you'd call it.
Sure.
So that was my first introduction to safety.
Now, was he in construction?
He ran a construction business, yeah, and he built houses, built offices, that type of thing.
Wonderful. Well, I'll tell you, those old it's funny because they're just like football and other sports. Helmets are an evolving thing, and you look at some of the old helmets from the football days of the 70s, but you also look at the helmets of the compliance OSHA standards and so forth. I think more damage would be done wearing that helmet, and you should just let the bar hit you on the head. It's basically the same thing. So those were your earliest days. And now, where do we find you? Where's home for you?
I live in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, I've lived many places. Worked for different companies and different facilities within companies, and so we've moved around quite a bit. And we are currently in Florida. Really enjoy that state. It's if you just visit, you usually say, that's a nice place. I wouldn't want to live there, right? Because you're in the tourist phase. But if you actually live there, most people fall in love with Florida.
Yeah, I've spent many many moons in Florida, and it's a wonderful place. Although I'll say I come from California, and just like California, um, you can go to one area and say, what's the big deal? Why is everybody talking about this? It's expensive and and then you can go 8 miles toward the ocean and go, oh my goodness, this is paradise. And I think, you know, it's always where you happen to have landed for the purpose of your trip that people set this global expectation around a very large state. So I find that to be humorous in general.
I think there's a statistic that says California is like, if you look at it, it's like 7% urban, and the rest is countryside or forest, or right. So you always think of like LA and the big cities, but there's a lot of land in California.
There really is. Actually, little known fact. I'm a fourth generation. My grandmother was, or actually, I'm a third generation. My kids are fourth. They were born there. I don't know if their kids will be, unfortunately. And we moved to Arizona. But that being said, when my family first came to Los Angeles, it was farms of LA. I mean, the studios were just getting going, and the agriculture business to this day, between farming and cattle and all the other things in the Central Coast, are as big as the studios. And people don't even realize it because it's just known for, the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. And you know what? And they create wonderful things. But there's a lot of, and San Francisco is actually not even Northern California. If you look on a map, it's actually, technically, it's Central California if you look at how far it can go above. But anyways, don't need to go into my geology lessons right now. I am still a proud Californian, even though I don't live there anymore. For some parts of it, at least. So, going back to your journey. So, I assume that when you were a small child and your father had to get hard hats, you didn't go straight into OSHA school. So, tell us about your journey. Tell us about your journey just from maybe high school, college into your career.
So I was an engineering major, and I was taking calculus 4 and statics and things like this, and I'm wearing myself out, and I need a GPA boost, right? So I took this course that was a EMT course, emergency medical technician, and I thought, that's great. It's 5 credit hours. It's for Sussa Annie. I can do this, right? Well, it'll be a totally different move. And I ended up becoming friends with the professor, and he wooed me into the safety college. He was like, Mike, those engineers aren't getting jobs when they graduate. You need to come into the safety college. We have jobs galore. So I said, oh, okay, I can, and so that kind of moved my life direction. Those conversations that you don't really put a lot of stock in make a difference in your life.
Having a son who's 21, I'll tell you, it's amazing how random, especially in our age, we are before the internet, we're before all the social media and all the other access to data. It was kind of whoever would hire you for your first job when you got out of college, if you weren't specialized, kind of set you down the path of your career. And it could have been very lucky, and it could have been absolutely unlucky. Hey, I got my first job at a buggy whip manufacturer. It's like, all right, well, you don't necessarily want to build your whole life around that. But it is interesting that those conversations in college, that those moments, they really are pivotal to somebody's life, the life journey that we all have, right? So you got through that safety program, and when you graduated, was he correct? Did you get a job out of college that you were happy with?
I had several offers, which was really exciting. I think it was like the big decision was between 23,000 and 24,000. So just a reference, right? It's back then, and anyway, so I went to work with a paper company, international paper. Started with them right out of college, and so that's how I got started in the heavy industry. Worked for them for many years. When started out as a trainee, then took over my own mill, and then took over a bigger mill, and then went to corporate. So that was kind of the journey.
I didn't know that part of your story, and that's why I love this podcast. That's quite an accomplishment in its own right. Like just the ability to come in as a trainee and at some point go to a mill and then a larger mill and then corporate. That's a journey in its own right and very impressive. What now when you went to corporate, did you go into the safety environment at that point? Or were you always in safety? What was the title and role?
It was safety to begin with. My degree was in fire science and safety engineering. And then, you know, I hired a guy. His name was Armando. I hired Armando, and I remember having a conversation with him. We still joke about it today. He goes, some people actually get a degree in this. I'm so excited. This is like great. I'm like, yeah, I'm one of those people. Right? So, so
That's
I
awesome.
actually got a degree in safety. Got a job in safety, and that's what I'm doing. So many people do safety. Maybe some people listening today are doing safety until something comes around.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's like it's like a mindset. And so whenever I'm talking to a group of safety professionals, I always say, would only the real safety professionals stand up? And I might be talking to a room of 30 or 50 or 100, right? And it's amazing to me that only one or two people will stand up in the group. I'm a safety, and they stand, and the rest of them don't stand up. And I'm like, that company is paying you 8 hours a day to be a safety person or an environmental person or an EHS, whatever your title is. They're paying you full wages for a full day's work, and you don't call yourself a professional, right? So it's a mindset is I'm going to do the best I can at this job, and I'm going to do it to the highest level I can. And a lot of people are like, I'm just doing this until something else comes along. It is a mindset.
That is, I've had these conversations. I'm very, very blessed to say that I've had some wonderful leaders on this podcast. You're the first one who ever brought that point up. And I often get a lot of grief on the Yellowbird positioning of the Yellowbird professional. And we call our people that we send out, and got thousands and thousands of them that go out and do surveys and trainings and such. We call them Yellowbird professionals. And the reason is because we expect them to be professionals. We expect them to be prepared. We expect them to look the part, to understand the information, to actually be a professional. And, so people have often said, well, why don't you just call them? And I'm like, no, it's purposeful. But it's also, in your question, I can understand because there's a lot of humility to this industry.
Because you don't know it all.
Right. And we never will. So what does it mean to be, you have to know it all to be a professional? No, you have to know that you don't know it all to be a professional, right? Fundamentally.
So Lou Holtz is one of my favorites. Just he's a great inspirational speaker, right? And
yes.
he says it's a commitment to excellence. He says, when my wife was getting surgery, I only wanted to ask the doctor one question, is that, are you committed to excellence? When you open that up, right, to do the work you're going to do, are you committed to excellence? I don't care what your degree is in, right? As long as you are able to really do a good job when you're in there.
That is, that is universal truth. And I think if we taught that characteristic to our younger EHS people, but also just to all of our young people, that if it's worth doing well, and it's worth doing to the best of our abilities. That mindset is so important. And there's too many shortcuts in the world today. And the reality is GPT and other AIs aren't making it any easier for the inclination to take a shortcut. But our brains are our most important tool, and we need to make sure we're using them effectively, not necessarily the tasks. That's what that's the whole thesis of Yellowbird. So, after international paper, you were an executive there. How long were you with the company before you left them?
15, 16 years, something like that. I'd have to look at the resume, but
yeah. I mean, long enough to be a long time. And
I did safety for most of that, and environmental, had EHS roles. Did that for the. I got bored a little bit with, I wanted what else is in life, right? I want to do something different, and so I had an opportunity to be a plant manager, right? Go and run production for a facility. Um, so that was a change, right? I went from remote control safety to direct control safety, as they say, right? Um, and I enjoyed that experience, that understanding, that aha moments every day after being not in that role, but helping others to do the safety portion of the role to actually doing the operations role. So that was huge in my mental development, my confidence level, et cetera, et cetera. So great experience.
I spoke with a lady yesterday. She'll be on the podcast in a bit. But she explained to me that she actually has gone and on her own accord and works for a very large company as the most senior role on an international safety program. And I won't give any more away for right now, but she has on her own accord gone to the factories and the facilities during swap outs of machinery, during electrical work, to physically be there, asked to help. And of course, the people there are like, oh boy, I'm going to have to deal with this. She goes, no, I don't want to get in your way, but I want you to let me do some of this stuff. And I promise I won't slow you down. But that mindset of it's difficult to govern something you've never done. It's difficult to how do you say, oh, just wear these gloves? And you're like, I'm trying to thread a needle. How am I going to wear these gloves? Do you know what I do? Well, it says you have to, it's that kind of thing that I love the practicality of the leaders in safety, because most people are like yourself that I've talked to that say, if I'm going to do this, I really need to understand how it affects people, like their job. So along those lines, when you wanted to do something new and you left IP, where did you go?
Well, I went back into safety, so I had the opportunity to be a vice president of safety for Owens Corning. So I took that role. It was a vice president roles don't come around every day, and so you get an opportunity to do that. You say yes, right? I mean, and you went down that path. That was really my first truly global role, right? I had I think 72 locations when I was at International Paper in the container business, but I mean that's a lot of sites.
That's a lot. That's a lot of sites in its own right.
There's a lot of sites, but not necessarily global. And so when I went into Corning, I did have sites in various countries in Asia and Europe, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a great growth moment for me as well. I had a great team there. People were awesome and just enjoyed it. Really, really a lot of great experience in my career.
So from an international perspective, I've often wondered this, and I haven't talked to anybody about it yet. When you have these facilities in these different countries and these different, everybody has their version, or at least should, I would hope, of the governance of OSHA or Department of Labor, or whatever their governing factors are in their country. But then there's also company and corporate standards of best practices that hopefully exceed whatever regulatory body is a bare minimum of expectation. How do you look at, how does a global company leader like yourself look at the global EHS expectations and programs? Is it training all in the same way, or what have you found?
Well, a company has to make a decision, and it's usually not up to the safety and environmental team, right? It is a company culture. It's a company decision. You either go with the island theory or you go with the country theory. And the island theory is, I'll just say Exxon, right? So we're Exxon. Every factory or every plant of Exxon is an island called Exxon Island, right? There is no other entity. It's an island called Exxon, or, well, that's an Indian Exxon facility, right? It's a philosophical decision. So if you say, you're in China, so you run it like a Chinese facility, then that's country based. If you say it's an Exxon facility and all Exxon facilities are run the same way, then it's the island theory. And it's truly a choice that the company has to make. Now, from a safety perspective, you have to determine that, right? That's if you're bucking the standard within the company, because that goes for the way they cost, the way they ship, the way they manufacture, right? Do they have one manufacturing way or do they have different way? So you have to understand your company and what it's designed and around, and then govern from that. I've had it both ways, and both have their merits. But at the end of the day, I think there is a baseline that you have to hold, right? You have to hold a baseline, and that is key. That clear understanding is known by everybody.
Now, do you find that from a language perspective that same philosophy kind of occurs where if we've chosen to be the island theory that everybody speaks English so that we all speak the same language and execute the same through the same communication style, or is that unrelated to this other mentality? I'm just curious on that.
Like I was saying earlier, it manifests itself in so many ways besides safety and environmental. It manifests its just in the way they communicate. So, do they send out an English document? If you're an English-owned company, it could be a French document, or whatever. But if you send out an English document, do you send it out and say, translate this at your site? Or do you send out that document in multiple languages? And I think there's a telltale there, right? So, right, if you send it out and expect everyone to translate it, or you send it out pre-translated, I think that's an important differentiation.
And it's interesting also because as you say that, and we'll move on to another subject in a moment. But as you say that, I think about the nuance of language and using Spanish as an example. There's Spanish in Spain and there's Spanish in Mexico. There's Portuguese that's close, but it is not Spanish. And there are words that do not translate from English. And so sometimes they either get mistranslated or, I imagine specifically in China and other places where there's dialects of even the same language, that gets really, really challenging. That's such an interesting point you just made. Thank you for bringing that up.
I have an interesting story related to that one. Or just real quick. I do a lot of training, and I get interpreters to help me to deliver that training. So there's good interpreters and bad interpreters, and when you use a lot of them, you realize it very quickly which is which. But I had this terrific guy, and we were down in Mexico training, and I got into the moment, right, and I'm going at it, and I say that's like being put in between a rock and a hard place, right? You just can't do that. And he goes, excuse me, Mr. Dupont, just a moment, please. Rock in a hard place. And I said, I don't know how to translate that. And I said, okay, so let's just take a time out, right? We'll just take a little break, 5-minute break. Everybody go get coffee or whatever. And so he goes and gets on his phone and he's typing away, and he comes back and he says, okay, I think I have it. We can go ahead and get started now. And I said, well, what's the translation, right? Like, he says,
yeah, I want to know. Yeah, what's a similar thing in Spanish, right?
In Mexico, we say between the sword and a wall.
Which, by the way,
right?
But I kind of like theirs better.
On the fly, he couldn't pull that together, but he there's some website that he went to, and like a chat room, and they gave him the advice.
That's actually
so you never know how things come around, right?
So that story, like I said yesterday when we were catching up while we were trying to technically troubleshoot, I said, this is your podcast, it's not mine, and I want to make sure that you are the star of the show, but I will always weave in a little bit of Yellowbird because it's what we do. But that story about that professional where he had the understanding that he could stop and say, Mr. Dupont, I don't understand. And he looked it up and he made the right answer, and you asked him how did the translation go? What are you going to tell them? Which was a good translation. When you can find how to identify that characteristic in a professional, that is where the magic on our platform happens, because that's the kind of stuff that you can't see on a resume. You didn't know your translator is going to be that guy, but or gal. That's the moment, right? And so I get excited about those kinds of stories, because I think, because we're doing a lot of soft skill onboarding now, and we're doing a lot of, it's not the same person that's a trainer, that's a document inspector. It can be, but it's not always, right? And so that's such an interesting story. It was a great story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
That's that, once again, that's that individual that could have, you know, problem and winged it, right? Heard a problem and winged it. Like, well, I'm too lazy to look up the regulation, but I think it says this, right? Uh, right. Either knows or he finds out for sure, right? And I think there's a certain level of experience too that plays into that. When I'm coaching young new safety leaders, I always say, don't let them send your packet, right? That's like a logo, but what that means is, so I need this maintenance leader, this old burly maintenance leader, to do something with the welding torch, whatever, right? I need this fixed, and he says, well, where does it say that in the regulation? And you go, and then I'll go check. And then you run off to go check. And then he's like, I sent that young guy away, right?
Yeah.
Right
I showed him.
I showed him.
I gave him homework.
Exactly. That, don't let him send your
Right.
packet, which means,
Right.
you've got to know where you stand and be able to say, look,
Sure.
that's just not right. Right. We just need to,
Right.
we need to take care of our people. That's not right. So there's a balance there as well. Right. You can't always run
Such
to
an
the regulation and let that be your power. Yeah. You also have to have internal power that says, I don't need the regulation to know that isn't right. Fix it.
Right. Exactly. And that fortitude, that ability to respond. It's I spent a lot of time coaching and training entrepreneurs. Well, you know that I was born with a disability, and that I really try to help people with disabilities start companies and empower themselves. And one of the things that I am very adamant about is knowing what you know and saying it confidently. And if you don't know, that's okay. But if you know that something isn't right, stand by it. And just because somebody has a better degree or somebody has a higher position or anything else, there's a nice way of doing it, but wrong is wrong. And one of the people that I interviewed said, the old timers generally will put themselves in harm's way a lot because they've done it this way for a long time and they've never had the outcome be detrimental. And doesn't mean it's the right way of doing things. And he asked, this professional said, if you hired your son or grandson right now to do this job, would you let him do that? And generally speaking, they're like, no, I don't think I would. It's like, okay, then be a leader. Show these kids the right way, right? And it's such a interesting way of viewing it, because just because nothing bad's ever happened doesn't mean it won't, right? And that's what we're all about in this industry. So speaking of, I want to hear about your 555 approach. It's I read a little bit about it. I would love for you to share the success story and the story of 555, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, it's not science. It's based on need and trying to get from A to B with a company. But um, I work for RYAM. It's a company that makes pulp and paper, and we're really a cellulose specialty company, which means we make cellulose, and to a high purity, a high quality level. And that's so pure that it can be made into a clear liquid. It's so pure, right? It's a really a neat product.
In the foundations of cellulose, what is this? Trees. Okay, just making sure everybody. So yes, I want to make sure that we speak to the language of the average human.
Yeah, cellulose. If you think about a tree, it's really its whole purpose on life is to suck water out of the earth, give it to the leaves, then the leaves grow, right, and they capture carbon and make a tree out of it. And in that doing, it's really tubes, really they're microscopic tubes that pull that water up. And when you boil those tubes down, it's really like a glass straw in a microscopic level. And so that's cellulose in its essence. And it's clear. It's not wood colored, right? It's actually a clear liquid. What's inside of it? The lignin, the inside is where it gets its color. I don't know if I'm making that too simple, but so that's how it becomes a clear liquid. It's fiber, glass straws floating around in something, right?
And so, how do you process How do you process that cellulose? You obviously get the wood, you get the lumber.
Yeah. So we use everything but the leaves, basically. The bark, the wood, the branch, all of it is used. If we don't make it in direct to cellulose, we use the bark and we burn it. We make electricity and we run our factories. We make so much electricity, we actually sell electricity to the city that we're in, right? It's really a neat process. If you've never been to a pulp and paper facility, I recommend that you do a tour. It's awe-inspiring. It's amazing. Um, but that's what we do. And when I joined RIAM, they were in the process of really trying to revamp their systems and get a safety program that they could really, really hold and be tangible to them. So I think the first thing that we did was we said, well, in order to manage safety, you have to say, well, what are you actually managing? What are you doing? Just hoping for no injuries is not a plan, right? And so we said, what do you do to prevent injuries every day? Well, we do this, we do that. All right, let's talk further about that. What is it that if you fail to do, somebody might get hurt? Right? Let's talk about those things. What do you do? Well, I go around and I talk to people and I make sure that they know I care and right and people just do interviews. You figure out this is what these people do. These people being the supervisors, the leaders, the managers, the hourly leaders, right? Whoever they are. And from that, then you start to say, all right, well, let's figure out how to measure that so we don't stop doing it. Because if we stop doing it, somebody might get hurt. And so we came up with 5 metrics that we felt like were the drivers of the safety outcome that we wanted, right? And you can never forget that your safety performance is directly designed, or the safety program that you have is directly designed to provide you the results you're getting. So if you're not getting the results you want, you have to have a different safety program. And so you have to say, all right, what are we going to do differently? What are we going to do more? What are we going to do better? What are we going to, right? And so we came up with 5 metrics, right? These are the metrics we feel like are going to drive a better performance, a better safety process, and result in less injuries for our employees. So once we developed those, we said, all right, so how do leaders manifest those? What kind of leaders do we want? And so we looked at, well, we would like our leaders to exhibit safety encouraging behaviors. And so we came up with the 5 behaviors that we wanted every leader in the company to do for safety. And we call those our extraordinary safety leader behaviors. All right. If you want to be an extraordinary safety leader, this is what we would see if we watched you. Right. And then we trained on that, we communicated that, and we built that expectation. And then we said, well, we've got these new metrics, we got these behaviors. How do we manage that? And they had spoken to a consulting company prior to my tenure starting, and that company wanted to have a bunch of committees and stuff like this. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of safety committees because they usually work me to death. Right.
Well, right.
As a safety person, right? And anyone listen to the call?
Absolutely. Yes.
They just give me a bunch of stuff to do every time they come together.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'm not going to be the victim of committees, but I would like to get committees to work to hold the value of our metrics and not let them be disconnected, not let them be marginalized, not let them be discounted. because the most important or most common failure that I see with leading metrics for safety is they come in strong and then they peter out and they don't really matter. And so I worked with our leadership team and we came up with the right committees to manage each one of our 5 metrics. So we have 5 committees, each one managing a metric. And their job was to ensure that it didn't, it didn't like feel like it wasn't right, or it didn't really measure the right thing, or it was broken, and so that became really the job, is to say, how do we make this really count? And so that's kind of the 5-5-5, right? We have 5 behaviors we expect of leaders. We have 5 metrics, and we have 5 committees that drive the value of that metrics program.
Can you give us an example, without going into anything proprietary or anything that you're not comfortable with, but can you give us an example of one of each of those just so we can kind of understand?
So we have a housekeeping, kind of basic, but have a dirty environment, right? We have a leaders conducting safety values exchanges. So a safety values exchange means, hey, Michael, how you doing today? I'd like to observe you doing your job a little bit and provide some feedback. And then in providing the feedback, then I exchange my value for your safety, and we have a 2-way conversation, right? With the most important part of that is you speaking to me about how we can make the job better, right? Etc. Then corrective actions completed on time is another metric. So when we have an injury and we do an investigation, we come up with corrective actions, we write down those corrective actions in a system. We put due dates, and do we get them done by the due date? And if you're late, that hurts your percentage of completion on time. So that's an important. Then we also have life safety programs, which we self-measure, right? So there'd be lockout, confined space, that type of thing. There's 5 of those too, by the way. But the life safety programs scoring provides a score for that leading metric.
Yeah, and then the 5 committees that basically oversee how those are all doing.
And the 5 behaviors, an example of that is my words and my actions match my expectations. So if you have the expectations of safety, I expect people to work safe. Well, your words aren't matching that, because you just had a whole meeting and you never even mentioned safety, right? Or you sent out the end of quarter production update and you didn't say how safety went, right? So your words aren't really matching your expectations because you didn't include safety in that message. Stuff like that. Act, intervene, and address. I never walk by. If I walk by something on the floor and unsafe condition, I'm basically saying I'm okay with that because I walked by. I didn't fix it. I didn't do anything. So that's an example of the behaviors that we also expect leaders to do, and we have 5 of those.
I love the practical way you communicate that, because you have to be practical about the jobs. And I often find that people who have done the job are easier to lead people doing the job. Sometimes when you come in and you're trying to demand authority or demand the respect because of your title, rather than having a conversation, say, I've had this job. I know it's a lot easier to just drop the tool down there and you'll come pick it up later, because you got to switch tools. It takes a little bit of time to put the tool away or to wind up the cord, right? But there's a reason for it. And having that dialogue is so important. It's funny. One of the number one things that we do at Yellowbird is people are using us for independent eyeballs for relatively simple things. They say, hey, we have 75 locations and we want you to walk through, but not as an inspector, but just as an observer, and just see how things are going, but follow this format and get a snapshot of the entire operation without having to require the leadership judge themselves or having other people there's no unbiasedness in having a corporate person do an evaluation of how I'm doing. It's like, it's really difficult, right? I mean, it's like, okay, I'm going to let this one slide this time, but you better fix that. That conversation happens way more often than it should. All the time. And, the independent nature of what we've been doing is very powerful. It kind of goes back to that same thing of we will never build a safety program for a company, but we will execute one. And it's
Exactly.
the same thing. You're able to create the 555. You're able to create all the things. Well, maybe implementation, you don't have the resources or to check on them. And if it's not, if it's not measured, it's, managed, it's not measured, or measured is not managed, I guess it would be. But either way you look at it, it's fascinating. Thank you for talking about this. This is such an important piece.
So, Michael, just one thing on that is you had mentioned seeing it from a different perspective. When I was in operations, I had a realization that every general manager makes a decision when he gets a corporate program sent to him, whether it be, quality or productivity or whatever. He makes a decision. Is this good for me? Is this going to help me? Or is this extra headache, right?
Yes.
Is this really going to help my life be better and my plant run better? Or is this just paperwork? They make those choices.
Safety committee, is it going to just load me up with more jobs to do, or is it going to help us?
Right. There are great safety committees out there. I don't want to say that they're
I know
not.
that.
Right?
I know. I was just
But at
using
the
your
same
example
time,
from
they
earlier.
make that choice. And so when you're
Right.
creating something that you're asking a general manager to do, you got to realize that person's going to make that choice. And so you
Sure.
have to build it and communicate about it so that the choice is not even a choice. It's just, no way would I
Yeah.
not do that, right? It's just good.
Right.
And you have to have that filter because they all make the choice. They all do.
Of course. Well, we all do. It's if you've had kids, which you have had, and grandkids, and we know that the path of least resistance is human nature. And if nobody wants to do laundry, nobody wants to do dishes, but to be a responsible human being and to have a clean household and a place that you want to live, you need to do these things. And it's kind of the same thing with, look, if you don't make it practical and easy for people to do the things, and also giving, I always try to focus on giving the kudos. Your facility in comparison, that's one of the things that the surveys do really well, is you say you're in the upper 90th percentile on all of these things, and you need to focus here, and here's some recommendations. Because then you're crushing all of this wonderful stuff, you're doing great, here's a couple of things. And I think the people who look at it from that perspective, that lens, and sometimes that does take independent eyeballs to do, to kind of give you that hey, I brought in an independent group and we looked at everything, and you know what, you guys are top notch. It's different than saying I sent out my safety manager for the region and he came back and said that he's doing a great job.
Yellowbird really does provide a service that helps regional corporate safety leaders, because when you go into a site, it's hard and it's almost impossible to feel from the GM's perspective that you're not out to get them, right? And it leaves a bad taste in their mouth, right? Like, that guy, every time he comes here, he gives me this big list, right? Or he's not coming here to, reward me for doing such a great job. He's coming here to find fault. And so it's just a negative connotation that is sometimes better served with the third party, right? And if Yellowbird does that for you, and then you're able to be the hero, like I love the reason I love systems is because I create the system, which is the metric or whatever, right? And that system causes them pain, them being the plant, and that pain is, our numbers are low. We got to get the number up. Right. And so it's not me that's causing their number to be low, it's the system. But then who do they call to help get the number up? Hey, Mike, can you come help us get our number up? Now I'm coming to help. It's a wonderful exchange, right? Although I created the system that caused the pain, but I'm now able to. And I think that's the delicacy of being a safety professional is you want everyone to understand on the level playing field where they are, whether you use a metric, a system, a third party, but then you have to come and help them to get better. And so you're actually the white knight and not the dark knight. Yeah.
I can't tell you how often I talk to people and they talk about how the reports that they are asked to do, they know for a fact are not being read and not having action. And one of the conversations I had yesterday, and by the way, this lady who has not even been on the podcast yet, obviously made a big impact on my life because on our conversation today, because she said she read one of these reports. It was basically an impact incident report. It was an incident post incident report, and the describe your surroundings during this event. And he literally said, seagulls flying, seagulls flying, all the way down the page. And she got that. He said, I've been doing that for 3 years. And he said, I wanted to see once if anybody was reading these things, and now I just do it because I want. And he goes, "You're the first." And she just started there at that time. This was a long time. And you'll hear the story on the podcast later, but she'd been there. She had just joined, and she goes, "Well, why would we ask you to do something if nobody's going to read it?" Because I kind of wondered that myself. But that's the piece. I mean, you have to be committed, even in your role as the safety leader and the professional and the person who's takes pride in this. If you ask people to take the time to do something, take the time to read it and acknowledge it,
Exactly.
right? It's a, it, you know, and that's, for me, I'm always about my philosophy from a platform perspective, and I have a difficult time with this. I'll be honest with you. I don't think I would with you guys. And funny enough, and I'll be clear for our audience, you're actually not even a customer. So the fact that you said those things means a lot to me. Thank you. Hopefully, at some point we do business together. But most of my guests are not actually. It's not a scenario where I even know if my guests are a customer. But I looked it up with you yesterday. That being said, expectation setting of what you want a professional to do when they go out to a location. What documents they're going to create? What does success look like? What is the output or outcome you're looking for? Is the only way you can send your own people or a third party, anybody out to a site. You'd be shocked on how many times I hear from a customer, oh, just use your normal template. And I'm like, we will, but I need you to sign off on it. We did eventually. I pushed back against that for about a year and a half, to be honest with you. I'm like, no, we're not going to create the template. You guys need to tell us what's important. Finally, I'm like, okay, here's a template that we feel is really, really good, but I still want you to sign off on it that it's in your eyes, it's really good. Because eye of the beholder. And you go to 20 locations, 20 different individuals do 20 different formats. You're not going to be measuring the same stuff. There's just no way, right? So, systems thinking, just like you said, Mike. So thank you for that. So, last question to try and go back to kind of land the plane here. You've been very generous with your time. You know, I want to talk about the human impact of travel and this industry. And how have you seen the impact of the EHS community and traveling and time on planes and all of this stuff affect the people of the industry? And do you think it affects turnover and morale and quality of the safety programs?
I have a terrific friend. I've known him since I was a kid. He's my best friend, I guess. I remember him saying, "Mike, you are too smart and too old to be doing so dumb." And he was referring to travel, right? Like, man, you gotta figure out this game, right? And it's easy for you to leave on a Sunday night and come back late on a Friday, right? And you're worn out and you're exhausted. And so you really have to make what you're doing while you're there really worth it. Um, I have traveled with um, leaders that go there and they have meetings at the mill or the plant or the facility, and then they're on their phone and they're on their computer. I'm thinking, while you're there, you should be there, right? Right. And I know you have a full-time job, but while you're there, be there. Cancel your meetings for the 3 days or whatever you're there for. And if you can't do that, then only be at the facility one day so that you're one day 100%, not 25% for 3 days. Um, it's really around saying I'm going to be 100% present. I'm going to do the best I can while I'm there, and I'm there 100%. And preparation, and that's everything. Getting to have that. You don't have the when you're doing training, you don't have the right to be boring. When you're doing a audit, you don't have the right to not really get into the weeds and pull on every thread. You're right. You've got to do a good job, and you can't do that halfway. So, only thing I can say about travel is don't do stupid, right?
Don't
Um,
do stupid. Yeah,
do
that's
stupid.
good.
Plan and make sure it's the right thing. And then while you're there, be 100% present so that when you come home, you think, you know what? It was a lot of away from my family time, but I
Hmm.
made a difference. And if you make a difference, you feel good about yourself. People appreciate the value you brought. So I think from a individual that travels, you gotta be
Right.
deliberate about
Yeah, I'm being more deliberate about it myself. I do a lot of keynote speaking. I meet with customers. I travel a decent amount, but I'm realizing um the hard way, to be honest with you. It affects my kids, my family, my wife, my health. That I don't need to be in a location for 3 days. I can fly there if many times in the morning, do what I need to do, have a long day, but be back in my bed late that night or the next morning fly out. And it's just a better use of my time and energy. And you don't have time to be you block that day. You do exactly, you're there for the purpose of why you're there. When you have 3 days, you can't really, it's difficult to block everything for just the task at hand. Um, I also often ask myself, am I the right person to be doing this job? And that's one of the reasons Yellowbird exists, but it's also one of the things I ask everybody in my own company. It's like, you got to think about your level in the company and your experience and your knowledge and your price. And if I'm going to take somebody who's $150,000 a year person and I'm going to put them on an airplane traveling all day to then go and have meals and entertainment and sleep overnight and everything else to go and do a safety training for 15 people at a site, and then they're going to stay overnight, they're going to have all that stuff, they're going to fly home, they're going to be exhausted. Is that the best use of a $150,000 leader? And almost unilaterally, that's how this industry operates. It's kind of surprising. It's shocking because they just don't believe anybody can do it as well as they can. And or I'm already paying this person. And it's like,
might as
well,
well use them,
you
right?
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You are, but you're paying their salary, sure, but all of the costs, not to mention the opportunity cost and the turnover. I find that travel is the number one reason I hear that people leave organizations.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
today with
I
the
can't live on an airplane. I can't live on an airplane anymore. I just can't do it.
Yeah,
Like,
with AI generated avatars doing training for us, it becomes
yeah,
like, are you really using your brain on this one, right? Are you just
right,
using your body? And flying
right,
there is there's something about looking a guy in the eye and shaking his hand. There's some value there,
absolutely.
but at the same time, do you have to be there every time?
Yeah, we talk about that internally. We talk about the online training versus in-person training, and my belief is that there is absolutely a purpose and a place for the avatar in online training. Um, but when you're dealing with things that are high consequence or legally obligated, I mean, things like forklift, I don't know why people do online training for forklift because you have to be signed off on a vehicle on machines. So it's like, okay, well, you still have to send somebody out there to sign off on all these folks. So you may as well just do it in person. But that being said, it goes back to the what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to check the box and yes, they've all been trained, or they all truly understand why and how and that we care. And sending a third party doesn't mean you don't care. That's the other thing. It's not an either or. It's like, oh, if I don't go, they won't think that we care. It's like, no. You write the curriculum. you know, we can have every pro say, give a diatribe at the beginning about why RIAM loves you so much, if we wanted. I don't know if they feel like it was genuine, but So in closing, I want to just say thank you so much, Mike. This was a pleasure to record. Your insights are truly amazing. I would love to stay in touch. I'm going to ask you two final things. The first is from a hobbies perspective, because I'm a nerd and I noticed that you have a 3D printer behind you. Have you made anything fun with your 3D printer?
Well, this is not my 3D printer, but I have the identical one, so I'll disclose that. But I committed when I got it that I would not print toys. I wouldn't print little figurines. I would print solutions to problems. That was like, so I didn't make it a play toy. It was like a tool. This was my mentality, right? And so the first thing I printed was I bought one of those doorbells for the camera doorbells for your house, and it was pointing in the wrong direction.
The ring things.
Yeah, yep. It was pointing left towards like a wall. So I printed a wedge that was specially designed to get this thing at the right angle, and it was the right color, and they can't even notice it's there. So now it's mounted directly in the so I solved a problem with our 3D printer. It's like, yay.
I love it.
And so I've stuck with that.
What? That's awesome.
I said I'm going to not print, but with grandkids, I didn't hold to that. I printed
of course.
Something. Yeah, my little niece loves Snoopy, so I printed a few Snoopy.
Oh, that's fantastic. My son is studying architecture. He's 21. Absolutely loves it, doing great things. The most impactful thing I think that I've ever seen is the 3D printer for architects in training, because they're not only drafting and doing contours of land, but then they're building structures. And then as they're going along, they are printing little models to scale exactly of what they have designed. And I mean, and he's in college, but he brings some of his stuff home, and in his room, there's a couple of models that, are just wonderful. And I was like, wow, talk about use of technology in such a beneficial and wonderful way. So I love it. I can picture myself, by the way, not being able to find a washer for something and printing a washer. By the way, you were just talking about the utilitarian nature. It's like, man, I don't have the right size washer for this. And that'd be a really good application because they're flat and hard and relatively easy to print. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And we will talk with you soon.
All right. Hey, pleasure, Michael. Thank you. And remember, it all works if you care about people. So thanks.
Amen. Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.